If we had an amphitheater and had the power of the really the Spirit, just think sitting on the side of a mountain, 5 or 6 thousand people being able to listen and hear Yeshua speak, and without a microphone, without speakers. How did that happen, really? That is truly a miracle. So let's open with a word of prayer before we start this morning in our drash. Let's come to you, Father, most gracious Heavenly Father, on this holy Shabbat, the day that you set aside for us to come and to worship, Father, but to also rest in you, Father, and to seek shalom in our lives. We just thank you for the opportunity that we have. We just thank you for the place that we have and the weather and all the things that you provide each day, Father. We just pray for those that on their way or traveling or whatever it might be today. Also, we just lift up those that are walking in the valley of decision, Father. You will send the Holy Spirit to enable them to have understanding of your words, Father. You'll be with those that are sick and afflicted or whatever it might be, Father. That you will send your healing balm unto them, and your word is that balm. So we just ask that the words that are spoken here will be to your name's honor and glory, Father, not ours. We just ask that you open our ears that we may each hear in our own language, Father, the language of our hearts, as we have a desire to follow you in all pathways. We just give you the praise, honor, and glory in these things we ask in Yeshua's name, and amen. All right, Vayeshev is our name of our Torah portion this week, and it means, and he settled. So this, like most all of them, is just packed full of a lot of interesting prophetic things that we're going to share today, and hopefully learn maybe some new things or things that we bring to our remembrance that we have read and studied before, possibly. We're going to start in Genesis 38, 1-7, instead of at the beginning, because, like I say, there's so much. I chose this part of the portion because, to me, it's very, very important to see exactly what went on and why it went on and what is the long-term effects of this action. We become to find out that all actions bring forth a reaction, right? I think that's one of the understanding foundations of our world is action creates a reaction, right? Whether it's good or bad. So we're going to start in Genesis 38, 1-7. And it came to pass at that time that Judah went down from his brothers and turned into a certain Adullamite, whose name was Haran. And Judah saw there a daughter of a certain Canaanite, whose name was Shula. And he took her and went into her, and she conceived and bare a son, and he called his name She conceived again and bare a son, and she called his name Onan. And she yet again conceived and bare a son, and called his name Shelah. And he was at Chezeb when she bare him. And Judah took a wife for his firstborn, whose name was Tamar. And Judah's firstborn was wicked in the sight of Yahweh, and Yahweh slew him. Wow, I think this is one of the first times maybe, and maybe somewhat the only time where it comes right out and says that the father slew someone. I know that throughout history he's used man to fight battles and to overcome and throw out those out of the Canaan in different places. But this must have been something very bad that went on. And Judah said unto Onan, Go unto to thy brother's wife and marry her and raise up seed to thy brother. And Onan knew that the seed should not be his. And it came to pass when he went into his brother's wife that he spilled it on the ground, lest that he should give seed to his brother. And the thing which he did displeased Yahweh, wherefore he slew him also. Wow. Then said Judah to Tamar, his daughter-in-law, remain a widow at thy father's house till Shelah, my son, be grown. For he said, lest peradventure he die also, as his brethren did. And Tamar went and dwelt in her father's house. What a story here we're reading. It says, in the process of time, the daughters of Shelah, Judah's wife, died. And Judah was comforted and went up into his sheep shearers to Timnah, he and his friend Hiram the Adullamite. It was told Tamar, saying, behold, thy father-in-law goes up to Timnah to shear his sheep. And she put her widow's garments off from her, covered her with a veil, and wrapped herself, and set in an open place which is by the way to Timnah. For she saw that Shelah was grown, and she was not given unto him to wife. And when Judah saw her, he thought her to be a harlot, because she had covered her face. And he turned unto her by the way and said, go to, I pray thee, let me come in unto thee. For he knew not that she was his daughter-in-law. And she said, what will you give me that thou mayest come in unto me? And he said, I will send thee a kid from the flock. And she said, wilt thou give me a pledge till thou send it? And he said, what pledge shall I give thee? And she said, thy signet and thy bracelet. Actually, in the Hebrew, it says thy cord. This right here. That's really what it was. Because that was one of the things that they used to seal anything with, contracts or whatever it might be. And thy staff that is in thine hand, and he gave it her, and came in unto her, and she conceived by him. And she arose and went away, and laid by her veil from her off of her, and put on the garments of her widowhood. And Judah sent the kid by the hand of his friend the Adullamite to receive his pledge from the woman's hand, but he found her not. Then he asked the men of that place, saying, where is the harlot that was openly by the side? And they said, there was no harlot in this place. And Judah said, let her take it to her, lest we be ashamed. Behold, I sent this kid, and thou hast not found her. It came to pass about 3 months after that it was told Judah, saying, tomorrow thy daughter-in-law hath played the harlot, and also, behold, she is with child by whoredom. And Judah said, bring her forth, and let her be burnt. When she was brought forth, she sent to her father-in-law, saying, by the man whose these are, am I with child. And she said, discern, I pray thee, whose are these, the signet and the bracelet and the staff? And Judah acknowledged them and said, she hath been more righteous than I, because that I gave her not to Shelah, my son, and he knew her not again anymore. Interesting. And it came to pass in the time of her travail that, behold, twins were in her womb. It came to pass when she travailed that the one put out his hand, and the midwife took and bound upon his hand a scarlet thread, saying, this came out first. And it came to pass as he drew back his hand that, behold, his brother came out. And she said, how hast thou broken forth? This breach be upon thee. Therefore his name was called Perez. And afterwards came out his brother that had the scarlet thread upon his hand, and his name was called Zarar. Interesting story here that is juxtaposed right in the middle of the rest of the Torah portion that speaks of the selling of Joseph as a slave into Egypt. Right in the middle of the story, all of a sudden this story appears. And we go like, what? Why is this put right here? we're reading this story. Why would you put this story in? Well, it has far-reaching significance, is why. And that we know that God's in charge and that He knows all things from beginning to end. I want to show you this next slide. This is the reason why that this took place like it did and where it did. This shows the lineage of Tamar and through Perez, King David, and the Messiah. This was set forth by Jehovah himself to bring about the ability to bring forth the Messiah. So we're going to talk about that a little bit before we go on. It's interesting that these were twins. We had just finished the story not too far back, the twins of Esau and Jacob, right? And how that Jacob, when he was born, he was the second to be born, and he come out holding the heel of Esau. And that how through his mother and so forth that he obtained the birthright of the firstborn. And that this was somewhat sealed with the father. So here we see another set of twins. Interesting that all of these stories contain twins. So is it telling us something maybe? Just that particular thing. So we're going to look at a couple of things. Says when Tamar gives birth to her twins, the Torah gives us a detailed description, which is kind of strange. While she was in labor, one of the babies stuck out his hand from the womb. And the midwife took a scarlet thread and tied it on his hand to signify that this emerged first. Then the baby withdrew its hand back. But as soon as he withdrew his hand, his brother emerged. And his mother said, "With what vigor have you pushed yourself ahead?" So Judah named him Perez, meaning breaking through. The very name, very word, meaning breaking through. Then his brother, who had the scarlet thread on his hand, emerged, and Judah named him Zerah, meaning shining. Says, why do we need to know that one stretched out his hand and pulled it back, and the other burst ahead and emerged first? Why do we have to know that the midwife tied a crimson thread on his hand because she thought that he would be born first? What message is the Torah trying to convey to us? There are two paths that we walk on our journey in this world. We can walk the bright and shiny path. We can strive to never to succumb to evil temptation and to always make the right choices. Or we may find ourselves on the more tricky path. We follow our heart even when it directs us to places our mind caution us to stay away from. Those of us on this second path make mistakes. We stumble. We lose our innocence. We probably cause pain to ourselves and to people who love us. We may even reach a place of total spiritual darkness, a place where we can no longer hear the whispering voice of Elohim, directing us back to the path of life. And then we may burst forward. We don't know where we get the strength from. We are not sure if and how we will be able to rebuild our shattered relationships. We are not certain we will have the strength of character to sustain as we push forward, trying to escape old habits. But we burst forward and push ahead and do all it takes to make it back to where we need to be. And then we discover that believing that second by leaving that second path, we have come out ahead in the game of life. While at the outset we should have taken the firstborn path, the path Jehovah wanted us to choose, ultimately we are now ahead. For the journey through the wilderness of life forces us to dig deeper, to mine our soul for spiritual courage, and to discover treasures that most people never find. We discover within ourselves the power to burst through any challenge, to overcome any obstacle, and to shatter any roadblock. We discover that our commitment to the people and ideas we hold dear is unbreakable. Chain breakers, are we? The strength needed to burst forward and get us back on the right path is now channeled to sustain and nurture our commitments. It says one of the babies stuck out his hand from the womb. The midwife took a scarlet thread and tied it on his hand to signify this one emerged first. We recognize that our midwife is Jehovah. Tells us to take the first path, the path of the shiny crimson string. It's the path of Zarak, one who shines. It's the path that the Torah is pointing towards. And yet, if we fail to take the preferred path, if we find ourselves in the dark, we must know that we can be a Perez, one who bursts forward. The Torah tells us that ultimately Perez is the one who achieves greatness and becomes the ancestor of King David and the future Messiah. For the perfection of the world will be achieved not by those who never experienced pain, but by those whose pain was transformed into fuel. As Tamar exclaimed upon the birth of Perez, with what vigor have you pushed yourself ahead? So strive to stretch out your hand and reach for the crimson path. But if you fail, burst forward like Perez. You will be the firstborn. You will achieve more than anyone would dream possible. So that's just one of the things that Jehovah is trying to teach us through this story, that we can be the Perezes, that breaks from our old habits, our old life, to challenge ourselves. I'm going to look at the genealogy of Yeshua. This includes the line of Lot with his firstborn daughter, led to the birth of Moab, the ancestor of Ruth, who was the grandmother of King David. Also, Ruth married Boaz, who is a descendant of Salome, and Rahab, the harlot. The union of Judah and Tamar led to birth of Perez, from whom King David came. The union of King David with Bathsheba. In the genealogy of Yeshua in Matthew, only 4 women besides Mary are named: Tamar, Rahab, Ruth, and Bathsheba. What did these women have in common, or did they? Why did Jehovah create this thing, showing the genealogy of the Messiah coming through these women that were considered bad people? So what spiritual characters do you think that these 4 women had? Had faith. They knew what was right, and they acted upon it. We can really get it put together actually in Ruth 4:12. Because the blessing that was given to Boaz was this: may your house be like the house of Perez, whom Tamar bore to Judah, because of the offspring that Jehovah will give you by this young woman. Suggests that God's plan of blessing providentially overcame the weakness and frailty of all the people involved. It is encouraging, is it not? That no matter what your personal background, God can use you to accomplish His will. So we're going to look at something else that I'm sure that all of you have had question about. We've talked about this in our studies on Wednesday nights and beat it around, and a lot of people ask this question. Question is, the whole thing that is taking place here, is it destiny or is it free will? Do we believe in destiny? Do we believe that Yahweh is in control of all that transpires in the universe? That every human being is playing a predetermined role in a vast divine plan? Or do we believe in the freedom of every human being to choose a path to experience the consequences of those decisions? These two possibilities, destiny or free will, seem to be mutually exclusive. Seems to be that it can only be one or the other and not both. If we believe that everything is determined by Yahweh, seemingly we cannot also accept that a human being can be held accountable or rewarded for his or her actions. Yet, the Bible teaches us that divine destiny and free choice both exist and are not mutually exclusive. No biblical story expressed this lesson more powerful than the story of Joseph and his brothers. Joseph dreamed that his brothers would bow to him. Even his mother and dad would bow to him. The brothers in turn viewed Joseph as a threat and planned to kill him. At the last moment, they decided to sell him as a slave. Many years later, Joseph became the viceroy of Egypt, and his brothers indeed bowed to him. Joseph was reunited with his brothers and sustained them during a terrible famine. But how should we view the actions of the brothers? Could they say, well, the devil made me do that? On the one hand, the brothers were certainly guilty of sin. After all, they conspired to kill Joseph, and they sold him as a slave. On the other hand, the selling of Joseph was part of the divine plan for Joseph to achieve greatness and become the leader of the world's superpower. Were the brothers succumbing to sin, or were they pawns in the divine plan that would ultimately save their entire family? Good question. Was this an act of sin, or was it an act of redemption? We're going to throw another piece in this puzzle and for you to ponder upon. The Torah responds to the sale of Joseph by issuing two commandments. The first is the command to redeem the firstborn son. And the second is the commandment to give a half shekel once a year. The Torah refers to the half shekel as an atonement for the soul. The theme of each of these two commands is completely different. The command to give a half shekel is about atonement for the soul. Atonement implies that there is a sin. The commandment of redeeming the firstborn, commemorating the firstborn children at the time of the Exodus from Egypt, is a symbol of redemption. Despite the opposing themes, sin and redemption, both these commandments are associated with the sale of Joseph. Remember, they sold him for 20 shekels of silver. The Bible is teaching us how to view the actions of Joseph's brothers, as well as how to view the broader question of free choice versus divine destiny. The scriptures are revealing how any given scenario has multiple layers of meaning and can therefore be viewed from multiple perspectives. I think all of us has probably been in this long enough that we understand and see this, how things can have double meanings, double applications. Free choice and divine destiny operate simultaneously and without negating the other. If we look at the sale of Joseph from the perspective of the brothers, we see sin. We look at how much each brother profited from the sale, a half shekel. And we understand that the Torah's commandment to give an annual gift of a half shekel is a reminder to correct and avoid the terrible mistakes of the brothers. If, however, we choose to look at the story from the divine perspective, we understand that no human action can interfere with the divine plan. While the brothers used their free choice to choose sin, Yahweh used the sale of Joseph as a conduit for Joseph's eventual greatness. The lesson that we should learn from the story of the sale of Joseph is profound. A fellow human being can choose to harm us. We can even use our own free choice to harm ourselves. We can make a choice that will lead to failure, pain, and tragedy. Yet, like Joseph, we must understand it all can be a blessing. We must remember that despite human choice, Yahweh's plan is always at work, leading us toward redemption and healing. While the human being chooses evil, Yahweh is planting seeds of redemption. Because he says he didn't want anyone to fail, didn't want anyone to lose out. He wanted all to be saved. That's the overall divine plan. Your choices lead you down either one or the other path. But still, the plan still remains. Regardless of how far you go down that path, if you change and come back to the right path, redemption is there. It's freely given, freely offered. Okay, we're going to go ahead and look at some of the scriptures talking about predestination, because this has always been a question among a lot of people. So after we've looked at these items, let's look at the scriptures and see if we can really kind of see what the Father's trying to reveal to us. This is Ephesians 1, 5 through 11. Having predestinated us unto the adoption of children by Yeshua the Messiah to himself, according to the good pleasure of his will, to the praise of the honor of his grace, wherein he hath made us accepted in the Beloved, in whom we have redemption through his blood, the forgiveness of sins according to the riches of his grace, wherein he hath abounded toward us in all wisdom and prudence, having made known unto us the mystery of his will, according to his good pleasure, which he hath purposed in himself, that in the administration of the fullness of times he might gather together in one all things in the Messiah, both which are in heaven and which are upon earth, even in him, in whom also we have obtained an inheritance, being predestinated according to the purpose of him who works all things after the counsel of his own will. Now, do we understand it a little bit better, what he's trying to tell us? We're all can reach into that predestination because he wants the whole world to be saved. If we choose that path. So he's made the provision for us. It says, through his grace. It says, wherein he hath abounded toward us in all wisdom and prudence, having made known unto us the mystery of his will. That's what we just saw. The mystery of his will. That he wills for all to come to his glory. All come to him. That in the administration of the fullness of times he might gather together in all, one in all things in the Messiah, both which are in heaven and on earth, even in him. We have attained an inheritance through him. Wow. What a wonderful thought. What a wonderful plan. So how great is our God? He is the greatest because he's the only true God, right? Romans 8:29. For whom he did foreknow, he also did predestinate to become conformed to the image of his Son, that he might be the firstborn among many brethren. Are you foreknown? I think so. He knows each one of you. He says that he even knows how many hairs is upon your head. He has set forth this idea that you can be conformed to the image of Yeshua. That's why he says, let the mind of Yeshua be in you. It says, moreover, whom he did predestinate, them he also called. And whom he called, them he also justified. And whom he justifieth, them he also honored. Have you been called? All mankind has been called. Have you listened for that small, still voice? We just saw in the last couple of stories how that both boys were called. Only one answered the call. And also just being justified, and justified them he also honored. What shall we then say to these things? If Elohim be for us, who can be against us? I have sworn by myself, the word is gone out of my mouth in righteousness, and shall not return, that unto me every knee shall bow, every tongue shall confess. Wow. For it is written, as I live, saith Yahweh, every knee shall bow to me, and every tongue shall confess to Elohim. So then every one of us shall give an account of himself to Elohim. It says, in the story of Joseph and his brothers, and he being sold into Egypt, and also Judah and Tamar, represents the axiom that God creates the cure before the plague. Let that sink in a minute. God creates the cure before the plague. From the very beginning. In the Garden of Eden. He had the cure for that sin before Adam and Eve sinned. He said, here's the cure. Or was it predestination? Or was it happen chance? Or was it a result of his choices? It had to happen, though, didn't it? Because that was the overall plan, the divine plan from the beginning. So hopefully that's answered maybe some of our questions about predestination and what it is. But here in the story of Joseph being sold into captivity, he juxtaposes a story of redemption. So he's basically saying, you guys don't worry about it. I got it. This story right here, this happening right here, will be the redemption. Not only for Israel of old coming out of Egypt, but the redemption for us and for all that lived up until the time of his coming. So he talked about this wisdom and understanding that he is going to give us. I'm going to read a few scriptures on that before we move on. This is in Proverbs 1:1. The Proverbs of Solomon, the son of David, king of Israel, to know wisdom and instruction, to perceive the words of understanding. To receive the instruction of wisdom, justice, and judgment, and equality. That's what he calls us to have. He says, I will give it to you. All you need to do is ask. A wise man will hear and will increase learning, and a man of understanding shall obtain unto wise counsel. To understand a proverb and the interpretation, the words of the wise and their dark sayings, because the fear of Yahweh is the beginning of knowledge. But fools despise wisdom and instruction. How often do we see, unfortunately, in this world, speaking to Christians, that they have no idea what the Bible says? They've never read it. They've taken it on somebody else's ideas and thoughts. So if we despise wisdom and instruction, we're basically fools. We're going to go into Hosea 4:1. Hear the word of Yahweh, you children of Israel. For Yahweh hath a controversy with the inhabitants of the land, because there is no truth, nor mercy, nor knowledge of Elohim in the land. Could we not say that this is exactly what we see in our world today? In our own land. By swearing and lying and killing and stealing and committing adultery, they break out and blood touches blood. It says, therefore shall the land mourn, and every one that dwelleth therein shall languish. With the beasts of the field and with the fowls of heaven, yea, the fishes of the sea also shall be taken away. And as he goes on in Hosea, says, "Yet let no man strive nor reprove another, for thy people are as they that strive with the priest. Therefore shalt thou fall in the day, and the prophet also shall fall with thee in the night, and I will destroy thy mother." My people are destroyed for lack of knowledge. Because thou hast rejected knowledge, I will also reject thee, that thou shalt be no priest to me, seeing that thou hast forgotten the law of thy Elohim. I will also forget your children. This is the very thing that we hear preached all the time. The law has been fulfilled, been done away with. We have no knowledge of God's commands, of his scriptures. We read these old stories and say, well, that's those old stiff-necked Israelites and Jews, and that's why God got rid of them. Let's look at wisdom a little bit. It says, worldly wisdom is grounded in knowledge, but we really don't have perspective to interpret our knowledge. So as with most things in a relationship-based covenant, it all returns to our willingness to walk in intimacy with Jehovah. Walking in wisdom is walking in faith. Wow. Because it says, without faith it is impossible to please God, right? So walking in wisdom is walking in faith. There is an element of mystery. We simply don't have a formula for making a right decision apart from our ability to hear Jehovah. If we gain knowledge of our own, that's not going to help us, not going to save us. We can, however, spot the difference between worldly wisdom and the wisdom of Jehovah. James 3:15-17 gives us a list. This wisdom is not that which comes down from above, but is earthly, natural, demonic. For where jealousy and selfish ambition exist, there is disorder in every evil thing. But the wisdom from above is first pure, then peaceably, gentle, reasonable, full of mercy and good fruits, unwavering, without hypocrisy. That's the wisdom that we need to obtain to. That wisdom is embedded in his Torah. Human wisdom is never devoid of personal gain. That is our default perspective. Wisdom from above is pure, unmixed. It is peaceable, to facilitate drawing close to each other, gentle, sympathetic, reasonable, simple to comprehend. Because he says if you become as a little child, you can understand. Because children doesn't come with a preconceived, preset real ideas. They're open to learn and to absorb. Merciful, and it bears good fruits. Jehovah's wisdom can seem counterintuitive, but it doesn't waffle back and forth, and it doesn't pretend to be something it's not. There's a difference between something hid in mystery for us to search out and something hid in deceit so that we won't go looking for it. Wisdom is something Jehovah longs to cascade upon us in abundance without ceasing. But I do have to get over myself to embrace it. All this stuff in my life that I'm so concerned with, it isn't about me. On days I'm really smart, I realize that it's not even my life to preserve. It's not about me. It's not about us. It's not about yourself. All of these things that he listed here have nothing to do with our wisdom, our me. My life was forfeited from day one. I'm here because of mercy and grace. I don't have anything that wasn't given to me by Jehovah. And there's nothing expected of me that I am not first empowered to do. Wow. Oh, God, I just can't do that. I just couldn't do that. No, that's too hard. Nobody can keep those laws, so why even me try them, Lord? Nothing expected of me that I'm not first empowered to do. There's an invitation from Jehovah before each one of us. It's an invitation to adventure and mystery. Wisdom isn't about what you say or having the right answers. It's a lifestyle. Lifestyle. What we need is eyes to see and ears to hear, and to get that, we start by getting over ourselves. Worry less about who has offended us and more about have we offended Jehovah. That's what you need to be worried about. James 1:1 says, Jacob, a servant of Yahweh, and the master, Yeshua, the Messiah, to the 12 tribes which are scattered abroad, greetings. That should be all of us, right? My brethren, count it all joy when you fall into divers temptations, knowing this, that the trying of your faith works patience. But let patience have her perfect work, that you may be perfect and entire, wanting nothing. If any of you lack wisdom, let him ask of Elohim, that giveth to all men liberally, and upholds not, and it shall be given him. But let him ask in faith, nothing wavering. For who that wavers is like a wave of the sea, driven with the wind and tossed. For let not that man think that he shall receive anything of the sovereign. If you're double-minded or wishy-washy or can't get settled, what is the truth? It says, ask in faith. James goes on, 1:18 says, of his own will begot he us with the word of truth. Isn't that what all of us are drawn to, is truth? Is that what drew you here? Is that what drew you to this stage in your life? Was it the truth? Or was it the building? Or the preacher? Or the things that we do outside? The children's program, the youth program. Says that it should be the word of truth that draws us together. That we should be a kind of first fruits of his creatures. Wherefore, my beloved brethren, let every man be swift to hear, slow to speak, and slow to wrath. For the wrath of man works not the righteousness of Yahweh. Wherefore, put away all filthiness, abundance of evil, and receive with meekness the engrafted word, which is able to save your souls. But be you doers of the word, and not hearers only, deceiving your own selves. For if any be a hearer of the word and not a doer, he is like unto a man beholding his natural face in a glass. For he beholds himself and goes his ways, and straightway forgets what manner of man he was. If you're only seeking God one day a week, are you a doer of the word? Are you only calling on him in dire straits when there's crisis in your life? But whosoever looks into the perfect law of liberty. Wow. Well, you know, that old laws, it's bondage. We can't go under the law, it's bondage. It says here it's a perfect law of liberty. Because if you walk in his law, you're at liberty to walk in your life. We only come under the law when you sin, when you break his commands. It says, look into the perfect law of liberty and continue in it. He being not a forgetful hearer, but a doer of the work, this man shall be blessed in his deeds. If any man among you seem to be religious and bridles not his tongue, but deceives his own heart, this man's religion is vain. Man speaketh with forked tongue. Out one side of your mouth is blessing, and the other side is curses. Wow. Your religion is vain. Pure religion undefiled before Yahweh and the Father is this, to visit the fatherless and widows in their affliction, and to keep himself unspotted from the world. Keep himself unspotted from the world. Follow that shining path that we talked about. You can follow that other path, and there is a good result back in the end if you come back. But why put yourself through all of those problems? Why make it so hard on yourself? It says, for though we walk in the flesh, we do not war against the flesh. For the weapons of our warfare are not carnal, but mighty through Elohim to the pulling down of strongholds, casting down imaginations and every high thing that exalts itself against the knowledge of Elohim, and bringing into captivity every thought to the obedience of the Messiah. Casting down imaginations. We can get ourselves so off track by imagining things. If someone happened to walk by and didn't say this or that, we imagine that they don't like me, or they don't think I'm look right, or they think I'm this. Your imagination takes over, and pretty soon you're way out here. You've done imagined yourself out of contact with a lot of people. Every high thing that exalts itself. Also, are you puffing up yourself? I'm self-pride. Man, I'm the greatest thing since sliced bread. You know? So it says you need to get rid of that too. If you're going to exalt yourself, that you're some high thing. Bring into captivity every thought to the obedience of the Messiah. And with that, I'd like to say Shabbat Shalom.
Thank you for watching a teaching from Emet HaTorah. If you are ever in the Odessa area, we would love to welcome you to our Shabbat service, 11 a.m. every Sabbath. For more information or for more teachings, feel free to find us on the web, www.emethatorahodessa.com. Also, you can find us on Facebook. Thank you. God bless you and your family. Shalom.